Hello, I'm Melissa Stark, and I lead energy transition services globally for Accenture. It's been a year since we welcomed Zero Carbon Humber into as a signatory cluster at COP26 into the World Economic Forum's initiative, Transitioning Industrial Clusters Towards Net Zero. Just to remind you, industrial emissions account for about 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and more than half of these occur in industrial clusters. Since COP26, we've been spreading the word on how industrial clusters and the approach that we're taking with industrial clusters supports the creation of jobs, new industries, and local economic development while reducing emissions, creating competitive industrial areas for the future. Our initiative now has 9 signatory clusters. These 9 clusters that you can see here represent 344 million tons of CO2. As a point of reference, that's emissions equivalent to France's emissions, over 1.1 million jobs, and over 180 billion in contribution to global GDP. So incredibly significant. The clusters are all in industrial heartlands with generations of people who have worked in these local industries. They have different industries and different technologies and different governance models, but they all have one thing in common: a commitment to the region that they're in to create jobs and improve economic competitiveness while reducing emissions.
So it sounds like this has a massive potential on a global scale. What are you targeting in this specific project?
Well, our initiative target is 100 clusters. So as I mentioned, we have 9 now in 6 different countries, and we're targeting 100. And we estimate that these 100 clusters, based on the size and scope of the clusters we have now, could represent something like 1.6 billion tons of CO2. So that would be well within the top 10 emitting countries, if you wanted to compare the group to a country. Over 2.5 trillion in GDP contribution and almost 18 million jobs. So incredibly significant. Just a reminder that the initiative is technology neutral. So, here in the UK, the 2 clusters that are in our program, Zero Carbon Humber and HyNet Northwest, are focused on CCS and hydrogen. But actually, if you see here in the framework, we have clusters that represent all of this. So that includes systemic efficiency and circularity, direct electrification, hydrogen, and CCS. And we do know that the Humber Cluster Plan actually includes all of these different technologies.
So where does the Humber sit in terms of the significance of its ambition to be the world's first net zero cluster?
So Zero Carbon Humber has been a flagship example that we've shared with more than 20 clusters, signatory and prospective, around the world. The partners in Zero Carbon Humber have been invited to workshops, one-on-one meetings, conferences, to share the things that they've learned. There's probably 5 characteristics of Zero Carbon Humber that resonates with the other clusters, and I'll go through those now. The first one is Zero Carbon Humber is part of a big picture around Humber and the local community. So we're looking at the overall Humber cluster plan, the public-private collaboration in Humber, for example, this event, the Waterline Summit, the UK's government support for Humber, and the local pride and support that there is in the cluster. Some clusters have challenges with their local stakeholders or need ideas on how to make the project or the idea or the initiatives kind of owned by the local community. And I think Zero Carbon Humber is a great example of that. The second is the focus on skills and the government's leveling up agenda in the Zero Carbon Humber plan, local economic development while reducing emissions. So how that's being planned and worked out and is really a key theme in all of the Zero Carbon Humber communications and plans is also another characteristic that other clusters want to learn more about. The third, there are a lot of equally sized big players in Zero Carbon Humber. So it's a marriage of equals with a very interesting governance model where the different partners kind of rotate different roles. So that's also very interesting. Historically, there are joint ventures or partnerships but the size and the number of players in zero carbon Humber and how they share that governance is very interesting, as clusters around the world have a lot of big players that will have to work together. The fourth thing is the multiplier effect. And you can really see it in the Humber cluster plan and kind of the momentum. So to go from the CCS trunk line that unlocks the blue hydrogen project, which creates infrastructure that will unlock green hydrogen in the future, and then everyone coming together for even more projects working, other parts of that technology framework. And then finally, the fifth area is the knowledge dissemination. I think the partners in Zero Carbon Humber have done more than 180 dissemination events all around the world. Maybe this counts as one with me talking about Zero Carbon Humber, but there's just been so much work around engaging different stakeholders that is going to be really important for all clusters around the world, because you have to bring the local community. It has to be their project, their initiative as well, right? That's the whole idea of creating jobs and economic development while reducing emissions.
Great. Well, thanks for that introduction, Melissa. We're sorry you can't join us, but look forward to hearing more from your colleague, Helen Barrow, in a moment.
Great. And thanks for giving me this opportunity to give you an update on our initiative.